Which brings us to the absolute necessity tomorrow of the National Cabinet to map out a logical plan to fight that new curve. Don't tell us that this is about a day-to-day changing landscape. Forget all of that. The trend has been set in every state and territory. The virus itself is behaving to a set trend. This business about, the paradigm changes from morning to afternoon, sorry, it's not doing that at the moment, except in those two clusters. Health bureaucrats with dreams of eradication, they need to step aside. That's never been the plan. Those leaders need to get the message that Australians now want a plan which will fire up the economy, create jobs, activate communities and take our handcuffs off those in isolation. Now, as part of that plan, we must know tomorrow when domestic travel restarts. We need to give tourism a timeline. They've got to prepare. And we need to set down the rules for a reopening of hospitality. This is the nut of our community. This is where we commune. This is where we talk to each other. This is where we get together. For the sake of the national psyche and the hundreds of thousands of lost jobs, we need pubs, clubs, restaurants and cafes to know when they'll reopen and how that will look. Well, to discuss that very important step and what the new normal might be, I'm joined right now by two heavy hitters in this space. Chef, restaurateur and TV host Luke Mangan and former Liberal MP, now a key manager of the Laundy Hotel Group, Craig Laundy. Gents, thank you very much for your time.
G'day, Chris.
Thanks for having me.
Let's start with you, Craig. Can the National Cabinet trust the hospitality industry, people like yourself and Luke and others, to reopen responsibly?
Yeah, Chris, short answer is yes, but you've mentioned in your editorial right off the top, I think they've, up until now, reverted to state-by-state borders. The reality is New South Wales has 6.5, 7 million people in it. And I had a publican from Tea Gardens ring me yesterday and said, look, why don't they reopen the regions first? Because one thing that's happened through this experience, Chris, is that the general public, pre-March 23, when we had no understanding of the scale and calamity or potential calamity of what we're dealing with, you had the Bondi Beach experience.
Yeah.
But I just don't think you get that now. I think people are very clear and understand that they have a personal responsibility to themselves, their family and the community to do the right thing. Now, if we've got vast, regional centres across the state, and every state, not just New South Wales, which have had no cases at all, and a council like Albury that said they didn't want the Melbourne Storm there yesterday. But if we can get people to do the right thing and not go to these regions for the short term, the locals, of which take a town like Wagga with 75,000 people in it, there's enough domestic business in that town to keep that town afloat. And I think we need to change focus. We've gone to the bigger picture. We had to. And the Premiers and the Prime Minister have done an amazing job. But I think we now need to get more granular because, it's the communities that have done the right thing that should be rewarded in opening first. And then also the business owners like Luke and myself who are fair income about reducing the amounts of bums on seats in the places that we run, doing the right thing, working with government and getting a time frame and a plan to which we can open.
Luke Mangan, tell me a little bit about the work going on behind the scenes at the moment to prepare for this announcement where you may have to open some of your restaurants. What's the new normal going to look like and what preparation are you doing?
Well, firstly, let me just say, I think the Laundy Pub Group will do an amazing job and be very responsible, as they always are and have been. I think with our restaurant business, I'm very lucky that the two establishments we've got in Sydney are very big restaurants, over 1,000 square metres. We're lucky enough to be able to space those tables out, the 1.5 metres that are needed.
And still make it cost effective, mate?
We are lucky enough that because they're big restaurants, the big spaces, that we might get, Glass, for example, in the Sydney Hilton, seats about 240 people. So if we half fill that, there's 110 covers in there that we should get a reasonable return. Now, will we make a profit on that? as you know, Chris, and as Craig knows, that in business, in this hospitality business, it is hard to make a buck. And I do fear for some of the other restaurateurs or cafes out there that are smaller, that if we start up like the government closes down, we're going to have a few more losses.
Craig, what's the new normal in restaurants then? Are we going to see, glass barricades? Are we going to see dividing panels between tables? Are we going to see people putting their name down? Patrons going to say, well, you can come in if you've got the COVID Safe app because we don't want to know exactly who you frequent while you're in this premises. What are we going to see? What's the new normal?
I don't think barricades. I think Luke hit the nail on the head, and I thank him for his kind words. But, it's sadly going to be a case of when the government give us the blueprint, based on, you can, I think, safely assume that we went into this before March 23rd with social distancing at one person per 4 square metres. If that's the case, each pub, club and restaurant becomes a victim of their footprint, as Luke alluded to. He said he's got 1,000 square metres, so he can have 250 people. He can turn those tables potentially 2 to 3 times a night on busy nights. Won't be what it always was for him, given that, the amazing business that he ran. But he has some scale. You take your local cafe and restaurant, your Chinese, your Italian, that's 70, 80 square metres and can only fit, under the restrictions, 15 to 20 people. Now, those operators, they're faced with 2 problems. The first is they have to set up their tables and chairs, so half the furniture, or 2/3 of the furniture will be out. They then have to set up their tables and chairs in a way that the people are 1.5 metres apart. Then they have to police it, because we found this going into March 23. As an operator, you've got a husband and wife that spend 12 hours a day together at home, go out for dinner, sit opposite each other at 750 millimetres apart, and you tap them on the shoulder and say, you need to sit diagonal. But we get that, we have to do it. But the sad part, and again Luke alluded to it, unless you have scale, there are going to be a lot of businesses. If you lose 75 to 80% of your turnover because you lose those bums on seat, guess what, Chris? You lose 75 to 80% of your staff.
Yep.
You have to as an operator, and that's where I don't think, JobKeeper at the moment and JobSeeker are phenomenally good, but I don't think we're going to be out of this current conundrum before September, and that gives us longer-term issues.
OK, now let's talk about timing. Luke Mangan, when should there be a reopening of the places where we congregate, where we mix, where we socialise? Because I feel that the nation in the last week and a half has changed tack a little bit. I think they're craving that social interaction again.
I think you're right, but I think it's got to be done when it's safe, because I think the worst thing that can happen to people like Craig, myself and other businesses is that we open slowly, which is more pain to a business, with wage costs and rents and things like that. And then we're shut down again. So we've got to do this properly. I think, as Craig said, the government have been absolutely fantastic with JobKeeper and JobSeeker and everything like that. But it's got to be done slowly, but that's going to hurt our business as well. So it's hard to say. As long as it's safe to enter a restaurant or a pub or wherever it be, we, the responsible operators like Craig and others, will do that properly.
Luke Mangan, Craig Laundy, interesting insight. I get this feeling that the East Coast will have to wait to probably around July before your premises, at the earliest, will open. But let's keep our fingers crossed that that happens, maybe even a fraction early. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Smitty.
Thank you.